What happens when you mix ketchup and salt into a paste and pack it onto your bait before casting? You'd expect fish to ignore it, maybe even avoid it. The color is wrong, the texture is wrong, and if someone handed you a tube of this stuff at a tackle shop, you'd walk right past it. But something about this combination triggers a feeding response so aggressive that at least 2 regional tournament circuits in the South have added language to their rule books specifically to keep it off the water during competition. The answer isn't about flavor. Fish don't experience ketchup the way you do on a cheeseburger. What they detect is a concentrated burst of free glutamates, the same compound that makes your brain register savory when you eat a ripe tomato, except fish sense it through taste cells embedded in their skin. Not their mouths, their actual skin. And the salt amplifies that signal in a way that turns a whisper into a shout. I read about this in a 1987 issue of In Fisherman that a guy at a flea market in Branson, Missouri, was selling out of a cardboard box. Flipped to an article about catfish baits, and buried in the last paragraph was a single line about tomato-based pastes mixed with rock salt outperforming commercial dip baits in side-by-side tank tests at a university extension program. One sentence, no follow-up, no photos, no brand tie-in, just a throwaway line that nobody ever picked up on. That one sentence turned into 3 years of messing around with different ratios, different application methods, and a lot of confused looks from other guys at the boat ramp. We're going to cover the exact ratio that works, why the cheap ketchup packets from a fast food restaurant actually work better than the premium bottle in your fridge, and how to apply this so it stays on your bait for 30 to 40 minutes instead of washing off on the first cast. Plus, near the end, there's a storage trick that lets you prep a week's worth of baits in about 10 minutes and keep them ready in your tackle bag. The mix itself is dead simple, but the ratio matters. You want 3 parts ketchup to 1 part table salt by volume. For a single fishing trip, that's roughly 3 tablespoons of ketchup and 1 tablespoon of salt. Mixed together in a small container, a cleaned-out pill bottle or an old film canister works perfectly. That gives you enough paste for about 4 to 5 hours of fishing. Stir it until the salt is fully dissolved. You don't want visible crystals. When it's right, the consistency should be slightly thicker than regular ketchup, about like tomato paste from a tube. That extra thickness is the whole point, and I'll explain why in a second. The reason this ratio works comes down to glutamate concentration. Tomatoes are one of the highest natural sources of free glutamic acid in any common food. A ripe tomato contains roughly 250 milligrams of free glutamate per 100 grams. Ketchup concentrates that by cooking the tomatoes down. Standard ketchup contains about 400 milligrams per 100 grams, nearly double what fresh tomato delivers. That's a significant amount of a compound that fish are biologically wired to detect. Fish have taste receptor cells, called taste buds in simple terms, distributed not just inside their mouths, but across their lips, fins, barbels, and in some species across large portions of their body surface. A channel catfish has these cells spread over almost every square inch of its exterior. A largemouth bass has dense concentrations on its lower jaw and lips, roughly 400 to 500 per square centimeter on the lip surface alone. These cells are tuned to detect 4 primary categories of dissolved compounds, and glutamates register in the category that triggers active feeding behavior. Not curiosity, not avoidance. Feeding. And this is where it connects to something you've probably noticed without being able to explain it. Your best days on the water almost always involve live bait or fresh-cut bait, not aged or frozen stuff. Fresh bait fish, live crawdads, fresh-cut shad. The reason isn't just that live bait moves, it's that living and freshly killed tissue is loaded with free glutamates. The moment a bait fish dies and tissue starts breaking down, glutamates flood out of the cells. That first hour after a bait fish dies is a glutamate bomb. Then the compound degrades, bacteria consume it, and by the time your frozen shad has thawed in the cooler for 2 hours, the glutamate content is a fraction of what it was. The ketchup-salt paste replaces what time and temperature stole from your bait. Salt does 2 things in this mix, and neither one is what you'd guess. First, sodium chloride is a known potentiator of glutamate detection in fish. Research published in Chemical Senses in 2003 demonstrated that the presence of dissolved salt alongside glutamate compounds lowered the detection threshold in several freshwater species by roughly 40%, meaning fish could pick up the glutamate signal from further away and at lower concentrations. Salt doesn't add its own attraction. It turns up the volume on the glutamate. Second, and this is the part that makes the ketchup-salt mix different from just squirting ketchup on a bait, salt changes the viscosity of the paste. Dissolved salt thickens ketchup. It's the same reason salted tomato sauce reduces faster than unsalted in your kitchen. That extra viscosity means the paste clings to soft plastics instead of dissolving on the first retrieve. A thin liquid scent washes off in 3 to 5 casts. This paste holds on for 20 to 40 minutes, depending on retrieve speed and water current. That sustained release is the difference between a fish detecting your bait once and swimming past versus detecting it continuously for the full time it's in the strike zone. You've lived the version of this problem without knowing the cause. You're fishing a brush pile, a sunken cluster of tree limbs and branches where fish like to hide and ambush prey, and you get a hit on the first cast. Pull up a nice one. Second cast, bump. Third cast, nothing. Fourth, nothing. Fifth, dead. You figure the school moved, maybe they did. But maybe what happened is your bait lost its chemical signature after the first 2 casts and became invisible in the water column while you kept throwing it at fish that couldn't find it anymore. Applying the paste is where technique matters more than you'd think. Scoop out a pea-sized amount, about the size of a pencil eraser, and work it into the body of the soft plastic. Not on the surface, into it. Take your thumb and press the paste into the plastic, rubbing it in small circles. Soft plastics have a slightly porous surface, and the pressure forces the paste into those micropores. This is critical. Paste sitting on the surface falls off. Paste worked into the pores leaches out slowly from the inside, the same way a slow-release cold medicine tablet works compared to a liquid. For a Riot Baits Fuzzy Beaver, that's a compact creature bait about 4 inches long, roughly the length of your hand from wrist to fingertips. 1 pea-sized application covers the whole body. For a longer bait like a robo-worm straight tail, which is a thin, smooth worm about 7 inches long, roughly elbow to fingertips, use 2 applications, 1 in the middle of the body, 1 near the tail. The tail application matters for a specific reason. Bass and most predatory fish are tail strikers. They hit the back end of a bait first, clamping down on what they perceive as the fleeing end of a prey animal. If the glutamate concentration is highest at the tail, the first thing they taste when they bite confirms the feeding signal. Instead of a quick grab and spit, which is what happens with untreated plastics maybe half the time, they get a mouthful of glutamate and commit. That extra half second of commitment is the difference between a fish on your line and a short strike, where the fish bites the tail end but lets go before you can set the hook. I need to mention the ketchup packet trick because it matters more than it sounds. Fast food ketchup packets, the little single-serve ones from any burger place, consistently outperform bottled ketchup in my testing. The reason is sugar content. Premium bottled ketchup brands like Heinz use more sugar and high-fructose corn syrup per serving than the bulk packets that restaurants buy from wholesale suppliers. The packets have a higher ratio of tomato concentrate to sweetener, which means more glutamate per gram and less sugar diluting the signal. Sugar in the water creates a separate chemical profile that attracts smaller panfish like bluegill and sunfish, which isn't what you want when you're targeting bass or catfish. I collected about 40 packets from a road trip last summer and kept them in a Ziploc in my tackle bag. At roughly a quarter ounce each, 40 packets gave me enough paste material for close to 30 fishing trips. Total cost was $0, and whatever dignity I lost asking for extra ketchup at the drive-thru. If you're enjoying this so far, subscribe. We've got more of these coming. The conditions where this produces the biggest edge are specific, and knowing them saves you from wasting time when it won't help. Post-cold front days with high pressure and bluebird skies are where ketchup salt paste earns its reputation. Those bright, clear days after a front pushes through are the ones that make most fishermen want to stay home. Fish get lockjaw. They sit tight to cover, refuse to chase, and ignore most presentations. What they don't stop doing is passively feeding through chemical detection. They might not chase a crankbait. That's a hard-bodied diving lure with a lip on the front that makes it wobble when you reel. But they'll inhale a soft plastic that's sitting still and broadcasting a glutamate signal right in front of their face. On those tough post-front days, a treated netbait Paca Chunk, that's a compact trailer bait about 3 inches long, similar in size to a golf ball cut in half, on a 3/8 ounce jig, about the weight of 3/4 stacked together, fished slow and tight to wood cover, is one of the most reliable patterns I've found anywhere. The key on those days is patience. Cast the jig tight to a laydown, a fallen tree partially submerged in the water, and let it sit. Not for 5 seconds, for 30, maybe 45. Let the glutamate plume build around the bait while it sits motionless on the bottom. Post-front bass won't move far to eat, but if the food comes to them chemically, they'll open their mouth. I've had fish eat a jig that hadn't moved in over a minute. That doesn't happen with an untreated bait. A tournament club on Kerr Lake, which straddles the Virginia and North Carolina border, and is known for producing quality largemouth and spotted bass in its clear, rocky water, tracked results over their 2023 season. 12 events, 8 to 12 boats per event. 3 of the members started using a ketchup salt treatment partway through the year after one of them heard about it at a regional tackle expo. Those 3 anglers finished in the top 5 in 6 of the remaining 8 events after they switched. The club president mentioned it in a forum post on Carolina Sportsman's board, and it kicked off a thread that ran about 40 pages of people arguing about whether it was legitimate. Some guys called it placebo. Others said it was an unfair advantage that should be banned at the club level. The raw numbers were hard to argue with, though. Those 3 anglers had been consistent mid-pack finishers for the previous 2 seasons before the switch, averaging around 6th or 7th place, jumping to top 5 finishes that consistently doesn't happen by accident. The fish that responds most intensely to this, and it's not the one most people would guess, is channel catfish. Catfish have an extreme density of external taste cells. While bass sense glutamates primarily through their lips and lower jaw, a channel catfish detects them across its entire body surface, including the barbels, those whisker-like sensory organs hanging from the sides of its mouth. The barbels alone have enough taste cell density to detect dissolved glutamate at concentrations that would be undetectable to any other freshwater species in the same lake. A guide on Ross Barnett Reservoir in Mississippi told me he switched his catfish clients from commercial punch bait to a ketchup salt paste on sponge hooks 2 summers ago. Punch bait is that thick, commercial stink bait that comes in a tub, and you punch a treble hook, a hook with 3 points fanning out from a single shank, into the tub to load it up. The punch bait worked. It always works for catfish, but the ketchup salt paste on a sponge, a small cube of open-cell sponge threaded onto a hook that holds and releases liquid slowly, outperformed it in average size of fish caught. Not total numbers, but size. His theory was that the sustained glutamate release attracted the larger, more cautious catfish that wouldn't approach the aggressive stink cloud from commercial baits. Bigger cats tend to be more selective. They've survived longer because they investigate before committing. A steady, moderate chemical signal reads as natural food to them, while a blast of fermented cheese and chicken blood reads as suspicious. I'm not 100% sold on his theory, but his client photos from those 2 seasons are convincing when to leave this at home. Night fishing. Fish hunting in low-light and no-light conditions shift almost entirely to their lateral line system, which is a row of pressure-sensitive cells running along each side of the fish from the gill plate to the tail. This system detects water displacement and vibration, not chemical compounds. At night, a fish pinpoints prey by feeling the pressure wave that prey creates as it moves through the water. Your eyes might be useless at 2 a.m., but a bass can map everything, moving within about 10 feet of it just through pressure changes. Scent and taste signals still reach the fish, but they drop to a distant second priority behind vibration data. A treated, soft plastic sitting motionless on the bottom at midnight is practically invisible to a bass, even if it's loaded with glutamate. Switch to a chatterbait. That's a compact lure with a hexagonal blade on the front that creates an aggressive wobble and vibration pattern when retrieved, or a spinnerbait with oversized willow leaf blades that thump and flash through the water column. At night, you want baits that move water, not baits that flavor it. Windy days with significant chop on the surface are also marginal for this approach. Wind-driven surface current disperses your glutamate plume in unpredictable directions and dilutes it faster than calm or lightly moving water allows. If whitecaps are showing, the chemical signal breaks apart before it reaches fish holding in deeper water. Save the paste for calmer conditions and fish a moving bait that generates its own attraction through vibration and water displacement. What I held back until now is the part that makes this practical instead of just interesting. Because the truth is, if you have to mix a fresh batch every time you fish, most people are going to try it once, think it's cool, and then forget about it by the 3rd trip, because it's one more thing to prep. This is the trick that made me keep coming back. And once you do it once, you'll never go back to fishing untreated plastics. Mix a large batch of the paste, about a cup of ketchup and a 1/3 cup of salt. Stir until smooth. Then take a full bag of soft plastics, whatever you fish most often, and dump them into a gallon Ziploc with the paste. Work the bag with your hands for about 2 minutes, kneading and massaging the paste into every bait like you're working dough. Squeeze out the air, seal it, and store it flat in your garage or a cool closet. Not the fridge. Trust me on this. Your wife or husband will have opinions about ketchup-smeared worms sitting next to the leftovers. After 48 hours, those plastics have absorbed the glutamate and salt compounds deep into their structure. Pull them out, let them air dry on newspaper for about 30 minutes, and put them back in their original bag. They look almost normal. Slightly pink-tinted if the plastic was a light color, but they'll hold that chemical signature for weeks. I've fished baits that sat in my tackle box for over a month after the treatment and still drew strikes noticeably faster than untreated versions of the same bait. A bag of 20 Riot Baits swim baits costs about $6. The ketchup and salt to treat all 20 costs roughly 50 cents. Compare that to buying pre-scented or injectable soft plastics at $9 to $12 a bag, and the savings compound fast. $9 a bag, 3 bags a month, 8 months a year. That's $216 a season on premium scented plastics. Over 10 years, $2,160. And the glutamate concentration in most commercial scented baits is lower than what you get from this home treatment, because manufacturers cut it with plasticizers and stabilizers to extend shelf life. The honest reality is this: knowing what triggers a fish to bite won't make every day a great day on the water. Conditions still matter. Timing still matters. Presentation still matters. But when everything else is equal, giving your bait a chemical voice that speaks the same language fish have been listening to for millions of years, that tips the scale. One trip with treated baits next to your untreated ones, and the difference speaks for itself.